Բարի երեկո, սիրելիներ։ Շատ շնորհակալություն ձեր ներկայության համար։ Այսօր հայագիտական ուսման ծրագիրը պատիվը ունի հյուրընկալելու Dr. Nona Shah Nazariana. Hello and welcome to the program of Armenian Studies' first academic event of 2018. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Shah Nazarian for accepting our invitation and coming to speak to us today about the politics of gender and gender equality within Armenia in the context of relations with Russia and the West. Nona is a social anthropologist and a senior research fellow at the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography at the National Academy of Sciences, Yerevan. She was also affiliated with the Center for Independent Social Research in St. Petersburg. And in 2017, she was a visiting fellow at the University of Stanford. Nona has written extensively on the issues of gender, war, migration, memory, and diaspora in the Caucasus. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome Nona to speak to us all today.
Thank you, Raphael. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you very much for coming. I will organize my lecture in the following way. I will first talk about the subject, and then I have plenty of slides. I will comment them, and then I will be happy to answer your questions. So, since late 2012, the term gender in the Armenian discursive space obtained a tremendous sensitivity, even became a pejorative insult. Local conservatives stated that the term is associated with European values and that the entire discourse on gender equality can affect the future political developments. New conservatism, which I will name further anti-genderism in Armenia, is connected with the Russian political movements and can be considered as the realization of Russia's smart or soft power. This is associated with the emergence of the Pan-Russian Parents Committee organization in 5 countries: Russia, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, playing on patriotic feelings of citizens and chanting the ideals of the so-called Eurasian family. In particular, the Pan-Armenian Parents Committee arranged a variety of actions against gender law being interpreted as propaganda of homosexuality, նույնասերական քարոզ in Armenian. Russian influence is definitely there. However, this would be a simplification of what is going on, as far as some other key social actors are closely involved, such as local independent actors, NGOs, political elites, and other groups of individuals. And 2013, in that sense, was a milestone in the history of the civil sector in Armenia. More than that, the backlash in this area, namely the emergence of gender ideology, quote-unquote, as an enemy figure, has a strong transnational aspect, including, among others, Germany, France, and countries of Visegrad Group. So I want to tell you a little bit about political context in Armenia and why actually I state that there is the soft power and the smart power coming from Russia is there. On September 3, 2013, Armenia's President Serge Sargsyan held negotiations with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Immediately afterwards, while still in Moscow, Sargsyan announced that Armenia would join the custom unions, Tamoženny Soyuz, renamed later into Eurasian Economic Union. Instead of signing an association agreement with the European Union, As European Union-Armenia negotiations on the association agreement had just been finalized 6 weeks earlier, Armenia was planning to initiate the agreement in November. Armenian president's statement was rather unexpected, especially considering previous statements by Prime Minister Tigran Sargsyan and other officials about the impossibility of joining the customs union. After Sargsyan's U-turn, he started explaining that the decision was made because of Russia's strategic role in Armenia's security policy, including economic reasons. However, a variety of sources provides more plausible explanations. Russian pressure on Armenia, including threats to cancel security guarantees and an increase of the gas price, among other leverages. Post-Soviet states, among other post-Soviet states, the Armenian case is quite special because of the announced so-called complementary politics towards old Russia and new European Union allies. In Armenia, this is discussed in terms of hard geopolitical dilemmas, which bring to the pressing security issues in Armenia since independence, 1991. Fears of moral and demographic decline are linked to understanding of patriotism and lead to the idea that we should not jeopardize the national unity when there is an external enemy. The hot mainstream national topics are conscription army and pronatalism, reproduction of the nation, and mobilization around the specific slogans. It deals with family policy and special legislative measures to reduce and stop gender-based selective abortions as well. As a result of political manipulations, the term and its associated discourses were in the focus of public debate and still carry a strong potential for conflict. According to alternative reports and announcements made by NGOs, attacks on gender and LGBTI community are seen as political technologies for distraction from the various important topics, namely electoral fraud in 2012, accession to the European Economic Union in 2013. In this socio-political context of contested neighborhood, one can ask, is gender geopolitical? The events of last 5 years in South Caucasus suggest that the answer is positive. Some scholars, including Stanford-based historian Gail Lapidus back in 2000, argue that gender democracy became a crucial point of transition. Virtually no one from the West or East anticipated in the initial euphoria that gender issues would prove to be one of the most problematic aspects of the transition, and indeed that political democratization and economic reforms might significantly increase rather than attenuate the gender asymmetries. Yet this has become the case in the countries of the Soviet Union, where women have not only become the majority of the unemployed, but have also become depoliticized and are largely left out of the government, political parties, and the official public sphere. Soviet legacy was decisively denied, including the experience of so-called state-sponsored feminism with their policy of Novaya Zhenshina, new woman, an ambitious attempt of destroying a patriarchal image of femininity, instead creating a new model of Soviet woman, and Novy Byt, new mode of life, with this central slogan, Долой кухонное рабство, no to kitchen slavery. Those early Soviet experimental projects implemented by Bolsheviks could be described as the ones that failed overall. Independent Armenia, in its turn, has a history of terminological and word choice struggles during the formation of the discourse on gender equality and non-discrimination. So it's important to turn to the political transformations the term gender has undergone. The term was adopted and used with relative ease for about 2 decades after the signing of major documents which outlines the main anti-discrimination provision. Among others, the 1979 UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, ratified by Armenia in 1993, the 1995 Beijing Convention and the Platform for Action documents on mainstreaming gender issues. The obligations undertaken by Armenia after signing these documents have significantly changed the legislative framework. However, despite the high level of Armenian legislative liberalization, the laws often face resistance from below, quote unquote, as well as from the conservative segments of the Armenian elites, and function, unfortunately, poorly. The turning point came in 2013. I want to reiterate that, when chapters of an organization called the Parents Committee were launched in 5 countries, and to promote the ideals of the so-called Eurasian family. Under pressure, the Armenian government approved on May 20, 2013, the same year, amendments to the law on ensuring equal rights for men and women, with one of the main feats being the deletion of the term gender from all documents, including, by the way, academic texts, because in my institute we had this kind of unofficial rule that it's better to not use them in titles, at least. Since 2013, the LGBTI community and human rights groups have documented numerous assaults which are part of an aggressive strategy by ultranationalists in Armenia and Orthodox clergymen in Georgia. In Georgia, they would announce that their function, their agenda is to, quote unquote, I'm quoting, to purify public space from sin. In this aggressive environment, even the Armenian Apostolic Church began to look moderate on LGBT issues. Yulia Antonian, a specialist on religion in Armenia, said that the Armenian Church preferred to leave gender issues in the secular sphere, which, however, resulted in it being privatized by a range of actors, including ultranationalist and Russian soft power agents. Anna Nikorosyan, former director of the NGO Society Without Violence, saw the rounds of gendered hysteria in the country as a Russian political method of tilting public opinion toward joining the custom union, which is Eurasian Economic Union, instead of toward an European Union Association Agreement. The notion of gender became a key battleground for producing new identity division and challenging the political status quo. children's rights, and gay marriage became a Trojan horse of the gender debates, enabling anti-gender theories to target a larger public audience. This way, conservatives tactically exploit moral panics. I borrowed this concept from Cohen, who contributed it in 1972. Rearticulating Armenian genocide and other traditional themes embedded in popular common sense to advance their political agenda. Taboos related to gender issues are certainly linked to nation building. That's my point. As family remains seen as a unit and the basis of the survival of the nation. At the same time, they are also clearly the result of Russian ideological and doctrinal pressure, and sometimes even of its hard power, which have had its dynamics through the entire period of transition and includes Russia's visible economic and military presence in Armenia and limitation of freedom that Russia imposes. Admittedly, Armenia has a track record of yielding to Russian prompts. As a result of this strife, the term gender disappeared from the political legal field, echoing the Russian political rhetoric. In 2014, Russian ambassador to Armenia, Ivan Valinkin, stated that there is a need to, I'm quoting, to neutralize the activities of those NGOs who drive a wedge in the Armenian-Russian relations, alluding to the introduction of repressive laws of the Russian model. 2 years earlier, the legislative amendments in Russia enacted on November 21st, 2012, stipulating that NGOs engaged in political activities and financed from the West should be registered as foreign agents. Armenia did not consider adopting such laws. However, indignant patriots launched a furious homophobic and anti-NGO campaign aimed at intimidating civic activists. So demographic panics and how they are kind of performed or presented, you can see on this slide, and we can come back to this if you want. Reasons for the extreme politicization of some homosexuality can be found in the Soviet myth that homosexuality originated in the West. In the South Caucasus, the homophobic practices trace their roots to legislature of Bolshevik and late Soviet period. During the Soviet times, male homosexual act was criminalized. This not only drove LGBTI deep undercover, exacerbating the cover-up strategies, but also supported the development of hate speech. With no doubt, the law also had repressive policing function of controlling dissidents and suppressing any form of individuality in the USSR. For example, through application of this law, the famous movie director Sergei Parajanov was straitjacketed in order to obstruct his dissident activity. The legislation not only intrudes the privacy, but also becomes an effective form of legitimate public stigma. Fear of moral panic and demographic moral and demographic decline are going hand in hand with patriotic topics such as army conscription and a pronatalist policy. The parallel between LGBTI and the memory of the genocide was even explicitly made. Some LGBT people are even called Turks, which embodies image of a genocidal enemy, dramatizing the issue to extreme. A flyer on Pushkin Street in Yerevan, visible in 2013, proclaimed, "Gender perversion is genocide." Groups like the Pan-Armenian Parents Committee argues that the gender equality legislation would not give unwarranted benefit to sexual minorities, but threaten the nation's survival, a powerful narrative in Armenians' public memory. So I would like also to bring your attention to the point that actually social media campaign, which replicates this claim, including an online petition on the website, change.org, and one of those who signed the petition commented on the website that the use of the word gender undermined traditional moral values and predicted that homosexuality would become widespread and fewer children would be born. This will lead to a decline in our already weak demographic growth, and given the military problems our state faces, it could threaten our national security, wrote the petitioner. According to a blogger who has played a leading role in the wave of protests against the legislation, soon we will adopt a law against discrimination and a law about juvenile justice, and these three laws, plus anti-domestic violence law, together are very dangerous, according to him. We are moving towards Europe, but at the same time, we need to worry about preserving our national identity. The thing is, what I wanted you to look closely at, that the Constitution previously was defining marriage differently, and after this anti-genderism movement, after this new conservatism campaign, the whole definition was, of course, under huge pressure, was redefined, was changed, and conservatives would insist, they insisted to define marriage as a union between men and women. So, but by this, I think it's obvious that it was kind of, in sense of democratic progressivist policy, a huge step back. With Putin, please. The thing is, the whole discourse is changing now because, and once again, why I still want to insist that in Armenian case particularly, the wind, let's say, comes from Russia. Valery Sperling is an anthropologist, a specialist on gender studies, who described this and analyzed this phenomenon in Russia very, very closely, and we can find quite good answers to our questions. What we see in broader context is the use of gender norms and sexualization in Russian politics in the Putin era. Putin incorporates the term traditionalism, quote unquote, and patriotism in his rhetoric, using the gender role of the macho man, which has been popular and is deep-rooted in Russian culture as well as in Armenian. It's easy to observe the process of how he legitimizes his authority and normalizes some unusual means for its manifestation. It looks like these retrograde Russian gender ideologies are connected to the ideology of a special path of Russia, особый путь. Rejection of Western values, partly because of the differences in gender norms, is a core attitude within the very electorate that supports Putin. They appreciate him as a strong, independent leader who will protect them from the pernicious influence of the West. In Russia, political actors incorporated gender norms in their authority-building toolboxes because of the accessibility and resonance of these aspects of cultural identity at elite and mass level alike. Because machismo and hegemonic masculinity are the very core of patriarchy, they provide numerous ways to validate the notion that being a powerful man is a natural part of being a political leader. According to Sperling's research, Kremlin political strategists and Putin himself have been making use of the deep-rooted stereotypes and gender norms that emerged in the 1990s. In her landmarking book, Sperling examines how attitudes of masculinity, femininity, and homophobia can be used as political tools. Through 3 different cases, Sperling examines how the pro- and anti-Putin movements construct a gender-specific power discourse and finds that despite the political differences and the opposing values between the movements, they still use exactly the same rhetoric, which is particularly homophobic in that they humiliate their opponents by questioning their masculinity. She also introduces a detailed mapping of youth political movements in Russia by analyzing pro- and anti-Kremlin organizations and support groups. Sperling explores the nature of political mobilization, participation in public events, and the political slogans of these movements, as well as the gender norms and symbols that the movements use in their rhetorics. But why political actors rely on certain gender roles and models, and why the ideas of feminism and gender equality are not popular even among the most progressive young politicians is a question for separate research. So I come to conclusion. I'm afraid I'm abusing time, and the conclusion is that since 2013, when Yerevan entered the customs union, gender issues became a crucial argument in all alleged East-West or Europe-Eurasia ideological confrontation. Armenian legislation, as well as Russian one, provide, according to some statistics, only for 7% rights protection for LGBTI, ranking these countries 47 out of 49 countries. And Azerbaijan at the end of the list. Georgia is the leader in the region, holding the 30th position. The whole issue has become extremely politicized, and especially around the same-sex relationships acquired geopolitical twist. So the binary approach focused on men and women only makes LGBTI people invisible and ignores their rights, realities, achievements, and challenges. To paraphrase Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, the globalized neoliberal democratic order is in crisis, and as a new paradigm is struggling to be born, various morbidities are allowed to rise to the surface. One such morbid symptom of this period of transition is illiberalism, a system which rests on the rejection of civic liberalism, but undermines democracy itself in the process. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for being a little bit spontaneous, but I think...
Yes, yes, we have time. We can go
Yes,
through the slides.
yes. If you don't mind, I can go through slides. And I will be... Yes. I want just to make more salient my main arguments. So first of all, for me it was very interesting, the process of this research, because I become from thinking that it is so obvious that Russia is putting this ideological pressure for cultural hegemony, and this we call it перетягивание каната, this struggle for post-Soviet countries, and these countries are desired to be back. So Hillary Clinton calls that Sovietization, creating European Economic Union, creation of Europe-Eurasian Economic Union was kind of obviously political act rather than economic, and this was just to manifest the Soviet or post-Soviet values. So that was my kind of, not mistake, but later on digging further, I just realized that this is actually quite a global phenomenon, and in Germany and in France there is a lot of there is almost the same discourse, even though there is no this confrontation between East and West. So it is not like the problem of West and the rest, but this is something, to me, what is going on, what is happening now, is very important because of what I mentioned, the change of paradigm. So the whole progressivist democratic project is under the threat. It is kind of challenged, and I'm sure that counter strategies are very important, and I think that these social transformers or reformers, they have to be sensitive to this critique to understand what can be changed, what can be done. So next one, thank you. And so in Armenia, it all gets kind of even more dramatized because of this ongoing war with Azerbaijan, and especially because, you know, this international organizations reports, almost all of them, they start with the sentence, women in Armenia are economically dependent. So, and then, you know, it's like main argument. Next one, please. But the thing is, what we can see in Armenia, and this is almost like kind of international trend, feminization of NGO sector, and which is free of corruption, and which is full of really greatly motivated people who are there for their principles. Next one, please. Yes, and as told, first 20 years, gender, now I've mentioned that gender is an insult in Armenia. When somebody wants to say you are not normal, they say gendermender. So, yeah, I think I talked quite enough about that. This is street, no problem. This is street graffiti, where where Putin actually kind of tries to act more sophisticated way, the soft power. Nothing like that happened before. Next one, please. So, and you know, as told, this is a slide. This is a picture from 1990 Republika Armenia newspaper, and you know the same problems come again and again. And by the way, "Join or Die" was taken. This slogan was taken, and this picture was taken from Civil War time in USA. Next one, please. And this is just joke. Gayropa is a pun word because Evropa in Russian is Europe, and Gayropa means exactly articulating that the whole vicious ideas come from Europe. Yeah, and there was even this action that people from Armenian names, they were kind of envoyed, they came as emissaries. They arrived to Yerevan, and they were talking only about this topic constantly. But next one, please. Yes, and this is why, you know, this is just to illustrate the idea that Russia became to combine both strategies to put pressure on Armenia, soft and hard power. So Kalashnikov is, of course, hard power, and we have a base, military base in Yerevan, in Armenia, and chocolate, Alyonushka, is kind of soft power. Yes, next one. And please, next one. Yeah, DIU, do it yourself, used to be a cafe in Yerevan for LGBTI people, for anybody for progressivists, let's say. And this cafe in late 2012 was blown up, and the owner, Somak, a lesbian woman who moved to Armenia from diaspora, I guess from the US, she just moved back. She left Armenia, and the thing is, exactly at that time, for people who could critically think and analyze, it was so obvious that, not so obvious, but if put some effort to understand, as soon as election starts and pre-election campaigns, so that to distract attention from fraud, etc., or corruption during election, something very dramatical and kind of, you know, somehow this was a very interesting psychological, psychosocial experiment which worked perfectly, because with very little cost, everything worked as new conservatives actually wanted. Next one, please, thank you. So a huge topic, let me to be optimist, I can come next time, I would like to talk about how this old struggle is performed in education sphere. How textbooks, again, there is a huge fight, even for changing just pictures in elementary school textbooks. Pictures where mothers always are washing dishes, and fathers are always sitting in cozy armchair and reading newspapers. Just to change that is a huge problem, and actually the resistance frequently comes from below. The teachers themselves, women, they are not happy, they don't want to change that. And in that sense, just dialectically or paradoxically, call it whatever, but sometimes some segments of elite, Armenian elite, political, leading, ruling elite, are more progressive than the community, in its majority, of course. Next one, please. This person, Boshoyan, really, he was actually absolutely aggressive. I mean, especially about changing curriculums, bringing this pedagogy of diversity into school curriculums. Yeah, next one, please. So there are a lot of challenging questions, to be honest, because first of all, the status of men in Armenian culture and in many patriarchal culture, Armenia in that sense is not an exception, but the status of men is very high. There are economic reasons, there are ideological reasons, even though physical strength and economic success are not connected to being male or female still. But at the same time, Armenia is not pressure, but kind of pressure, but having this, driving this policy of complementarism, trying to be economically with European Union and sending that message in all possible levels, and being calling Russia a strategic partner. It is all about this security dilemma, and so in 2013 it didn't work, but the good news is that in 2017, in November, I don't know, this is maybe a genius of Serge Sarkisyan, but the thing is, this time he signed this association agreement, and actually policy of complementarism worked out. So, but at the same time, the police reform and reformation of these male institutions, bringing there more women, and especially pushing women to be part of this siloviki, we call it, this totalitarian institution. I'm a little bit not critical about that. I just think that theoretically, from the point of view of feminist theory, it is very difficult to analyze and to interpret. Next one, please. Next one. Yes, and every time when the situation along the contact line gets let's say war starts, and all these ideas, they get again, they get extremely dramatized again. Next one, please. Yes, and after April War, you know what happened. The rating of Russia, Armenia, and especially de facto Nagorno-Karabakh are actually quite pro-Russian, and they are like 50-50. But still, after April War, that rating a little bit dropped down. Next one, please. Yes, and one of the very painful issues in modern Armenia is that we have second after China rank in rank of countries who employs these sex-selective abortions. Armenia is number 2. Last data says Azerbaijan is now number 2, but in Armenia there is one one district, which Gayropa, which is number 1 in the world on sex-selective abortions. So I have to be frank and to say that actually government put lots of efforts to change the situation, and the law was adopted in 2016, and doctors were banned to tell during the echo. And by the way, this is also a very interesting fact that this is maybe, I'm sure this is a heritage of Soviet Union, but echo, extracorporeal sonography, is quite accessible for all classes, social classes, and this is why they immediately on very early stage can know what sex is for fetus and get rid of girls. So yeah, it doesn't work properly, this law, but still. Next one, please. Yeah, and domestic violence. Domestic violence, anti-domestic violence law was attacked by these new conservatives, and one can say this, who can advocate for domestic violence? Nobody. But still, because they bring this child, by the way, in Europe and Visegrad group countries, the same situation. They just put to center the child in danger, sexualization and juvenile justice, etc., and showing terrible social advertisements and videos, how in the Western countries children are taken from their parents, etc., etc. So this, of course, affects people very much. Next one. Yeah, this is. I just wanted to reiterate that the situation of war actually for proliferation of this discourse is quite terrible, because even in Nagorno-Karabakh we see that, because existential threat is always there, contact line and ongoing war, so only strong men like Putin, KGB men, yeah, kind of, it's better them to be in power. Next one, please. Here is this explanation. I can send you if you want. And next one. I just want to leave a little bit of room for questions. And this is, it's very funny. This is how you maybe who has been in Yerevan, you remember this Mother Armenia. Mother Armenia was replaced, Stalin's monument was replaced by this monument. And the same happened in Georgia. And you see this virilized image of Armenian woman very, very strange position of sword, etc. But what I mean to say is that even there is no many monuments of women, real women in Armenia. It's very hard to find. This is like the image of all Armenian women, so reproductive value and mother of nation, etc. This is just manifestation of that. But Zabel Yesayan, there is no monuments. I don't know, Silva Kaputikan, lots of women, real women. You can see them in public commemoration or public space. Next one, please. Yeah, and actually, I am proud to say that in Armenia we have tiny, very tiny, but very, very efficient, effective NGO sector. And these two brave women, they recently on February 13, they went to mayor building and they actually wanted Taron, the mayor of Yerevan, to smell sewage water from Nubarashen, and they were beaten by security and other male politicians, and echoing that, most of male politicians, they actually were trying to defend mayor and to blame these women. Next one, please. So this slide is again street graffiti from Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. If you sexist me, I will feminist you. Okay? Okay. So yeah, it's just to say that my understanding is that gender education, which is now under threat, could be not shortcut. No, it's not shortcut way, but it would be tangible way to change this value, patriarchal value, domination of patriarchal value in Armenia. Yeah, but unfortunately, there are a couple of facts that hinder this process. One is that usually the signals come from European Union or UN organizations, and until now, before signing the document, European Union Association Agreement, before that, those signals or those recommendations had, how to say, recommendation character. They had no implementation power. And this is why every time government or governmental structure would say yes, 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 sure, and nothing would happen. And now I feel like I hope that something will really change. And the thing is, Soros Foundation already spent just a lot of money for for making for bringing gender sensitivity component in higher school education, $1 million, and unfortunately it doesn't work well because of, I think, my idea, my assumption is because of this brain drain. I think to start that in elementary school would be crucial, would be essential. And next one. Yes, and thank you very much. This is not slide, this is caricature from, if somebody is doing Soviet studies, this is very how you call it, textbook film from Soviet Union, and this is Morgunov, Russia, and Nikulin and Vitsin in the middle, but Ukrainian flag, you can easily just replace it with Armenian, because the situation is actually the same, but with more dramatical consequences for Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your very insightful talk, Nonna. So as the chair, I'm allowed to offer anyone a chance to ask their questions, but I'm going to abuse that in regular fashion, ask my own question first. I was quite interested in the aspect of how gender identity relates to the army in Armenia. As you said, there's conscription, and family values are seen as fundamental and key to the preservation of Armenia. Do you know if there are any, this is my pure ignorance, I don't know if there are any laws prohibiting women from being in the army, or even those who are not straight, for example, who associate themselves in the LGBT category. Do you know of any laws or any of the direction of general conversation in that regard?
Yes, yeah, this is very vibrant sphere, and in the very beginning, let's say, I started to monitor that in 2011-12 in Karabakh, in de facto Nagorno-Karabakh, and it seemed at that time that the pressure mostly comes again so soldiers like this, we call it in Russian didovshina, or bullying in army. I don't know how this very strange phenomenon with this Freudian sentiments like repetition, compulsion. And so soldiers, they would make this kind of bullying and pressure, and even the person like was not really even, there was no recognizing of being gay, but still there was a lot of pressure like that, stigmatization, etc. But later on, yes, you are right, two directions the kind of Nagorno-Karabakh government was very strict about that. One is Yehovah witnesses, because they actually talk about pacifist ideas and values, and they want for themselves alternative conscription. They don't want, they refuse to take weapon. And the second one was just if somebody announce, like coming out by saying that he is gay, then he can avoid conscription. And this is again, you know, this is very interesting again, because some people just play with that to avoid.
Because I've heard in Turkey.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. Please feel
You
free.
have to submit a video of video or pictures of
To prove.
to prove that you have the gender identity in order to avoid the military service. I don't know if it's the same.
No, it's not the same. Just coming out is enough. Yeah, but the thing is, I have to say that there are dominant discourse and there are marginal discourse, and I was happy just quite recently. I figured out that in some villages of Armenia, small villages, there are new trends. People want to have daughters rather than sons because at least they will survive. So, I started to believe to human rationality.
Well, thank you. Are there any questions from the floor? Yes. Sorry, 1 minute. I need to get a microphone.
Where do you think international organisations should best put their resources into supporting women's and LGBT rights in Armenia?
What they should do?
Where can they best help support the progression?
Yeah, how can they do it? What should they do?
Yeah, I really believe in school curricula, changing this school curricula, because the whole society is, this is just primordial kind of belief, and the reaction is very strong. So it should be done, I think. We have to work inside. We need consultations, and we don't need to invent bicycle again, but we have to work inside with help of organization. I think consultations would be great help, which we have actually.
Thank you for the presentation. Do you think it will be, because I was just wondering, obviously it's entirely right to say that the situation of the term gender, sexually alternative LGBT people in Armenia is a result of, we could say, post-Soviet Russian propaganda as well. But would you think it's useful to discuss the fault of the West? Because I have a feeling that, yes, people say that, oh, the West is doing, that, this is Gayropa and things like that. But it's true. The West always picks on Eastern nations, whether they be Middle Eastern or post-Soviet or behind the Iron Curtain, for certain things. They pick certain, for example, women's rights, LGBT rights, I don't know, sort of liberalization, privatization, things like that. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with the term, with equality, and absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with the term gender. There's nothing wrong with gender studies, and there's nothing wrong with LGBT rights. But at the same time as gender rights and LGBT rights are being politicized in the former Soviet bloc, they are also being politicized in the so-called West, like Western European countries. And whenever these impoverished countries such as Armenia need some favor from the European Union, they always lay out conditions. So in a sense, it is true. People are not wrong saying that this is a propaganda, because it is propaganda, politicized. That gender issue, I mean, I don't know how to elaborate. I'll probably sound very stupid at the moment, but gender issues are politicized in the West vis-a-vis so-called Eastern nations. So I think, do you think it will be useful at the same time to talk about how Western European nations, or let's say Western nations, attack Eastern nations, like what they exactly do to pick on them, as well as how Russia politicizes gender issues and LGBT rights in the opposite direction in future, discussions on this topic? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very interesting question and quite difficult as well. So I totally, first of all, I have to deconstruct your whole question by saying that I don't believe that there are Western countries and Eastern countries. I mean, in sense of, human rights are the same everywhere. I don't think that West invented human rights. That's not true, because we have moral compasses inside of us, and we know that something is wrong with what is going on in gender relationship, in male-female relationship and division of labor in family, outside of family, etc., etc. But the thing is, I totally agree with the second part, that if let's say Western countries, they push that agenda of gender equality, they absolutely should be, maybe must be sensitive to social context. I will bring you one example, historical example. This is just miracle that we have this evidence. But this is because the case was the woman was sued, and the interrogation was recorded. So what happened in Turkey, in Ottoman Empire, after British pressure to liberate women? Lots of prostitutes became, normal women became prostitutes because patriarchal system has this kind of functional system still. You know, I can only refer and send you to read this article written by Satani Shami. She's a specialist on Caucasus in New York, and she just explained that links, you know, and the same here. But at the same time, standards are important, right? My personal understanding is that Turkey, if we take Erdogan's speeches before 2010, European Union, European Union, content, very easy content analysis. Frequently, quite frequently, he was repeating that because there was this eager to be part of Europe, and then frustration. After 2010, Islam, our values, our. I think that something like that happened with Russia, because standards are too high. But at the same time, can we give justice or equality to one part and ignore another? To my view, my opinion, my understanding is that the most discriminated group of human beings on the planet are women, because it is, you know, there were states where gay culture was normal, like ancient Greece, etc. But women, for 1,000 years, nothing changed. Still now, BBC pays quite great salaries, but still women get, for the same work performed, they get a little bit smaller salaries than women. What I mean to say is this omnipresent, you know, it's so huge, that problems of, I don't make them small, not at all, but black, gay, ethnic minorities, that all is nothing compared to this. I mean, there are this theory of Crenshaw intersection, you know, lesbian, black woman is the most, you know, discriminated, but still women is something really big and fundamental, and, you know, to face this challenge, yeah, I think it's very important. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I see one more hand.
Just out of interest, are there, I know recently in Russia there's been a resurgence of, or not resurgence, surge of written feminist discourse. Is the same thing happening in Armenia over the last, say, couple of decades? Are there lots of Armenian feminist thinkers coming to the fore?
A resurgence?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say vice versa. You know, I actually, I was thinking about, this is not spontaneous what I'm trying to say, that, you know, there is a reason why in all post-Soviet countries, feminism is tremendously unpopular. And the reason, I think, is in Bolsheviks and Soviet policy and this Soviet-style state feminism incorporated in the very beginning. By the way, it was like scientifically kind of on the edge, avant-garde of science, to change everything, to break. But the problem, it had all chances to be successful, but the problem was that feminist project was competing with modernization project. And for Stalin, strong man, modernization was far more important than women issues. He immediately, cancelled abortions, which is backlash, and you know, a lot of things. You know, it's very obvious that women, they were used again to push modernization projects, and this is actually why feminism is so unpopular, because новый быт, долой кухонное рабство, it was all ignored later on, but what virtually they got, double, triple burden. They were doing all reproductive, invisible work at home, no help, neither from state nor from husbands, and productive work, being visible in public and doing, really having, not being weak sex. No, it was too much, and now they actually, it's sometimes so vocal. We want to enjoy patriarchy. This is the message. You know, we want to be women, patriarchal women, sit down and waiting when men being breadwinners, quite a difficult function. So this is, you know, we can go on that, but this is such a long topic.
Thank you.
I would be happy to continue in couloirs.
Thank you, everyone, for coming along to this lecture, and a massive thank you to you, Dr. Shahnazaryan, for this really interesting talk. I really appreciate it. To all those people watching on our YouTube channel, stay tuned to our newsletter. More events coming soon. Thank you very much.